Thank you, Adam. First of all, thank you for all the organizers and the CPCA and the University of Oxford for inviting me, for contributing to this day of working on animal welfare, animal sentience, animal conscious. I try to explain throughout this presentation is around 15 years of my job. I work on emotions in sheep, and I try to show how integrating cognition and emotions for these animals can tell us some information about their real consciousness in these animals. First of all, why should we care about emotions in animals? So this is in a direct connection of the discussion we had today. First, with the social demand for animal welfare in farm and laboratory animals, as we saw just previously. And so I used the Treaty of Amsterdam, but so we saw this morning that was really marked 10 years after we throughout the Treaty of Lisbon. Animals are considered as sentient beings. But as we discussed since the beginning of the day, that the term sentience is not really defined by the legislature. And the risk is that the lack of awareness of the sentience of animals can lead to anthropomorphic interpretation in one side or in the other direction. So there is a need to understand the subjectivity of animals. So this is what we are there today, so that we can objectively evaluate and improve their real welfare. Now, why should we care about emotions in animals? And besides the social demand, so there is a growing interest to study emotions in animals. With the emergence of affective neurosciences, more particularly with different fields presented here. And because emotions also is considered as a basic processes sustaining longer lasting affective states as welfare state or stress state. So now what do we know about emotions? So a very simple definition coming from Danzer. It's a brief affective reactions associated with specific body changes. So I represented here the two expressive components, the behavioral components and the physiological components. And we define emotion with a third component. This is a subjective component, the emotional experience. And we understand in this case that for studying emotions, we have to develop a psychological approach. That means that the emotional experience can only be inferred from the behavioral and the physiological change, as it is the case also in human. So other pioneers like Darwin, of course, because it's necessary to mention Darwin in this sort of presentation. So Darwin insisted about the fact that this is an adaptive process for explaining emotion, and that they are basically shared by many species. So it's not new, you can see, but also with the implication of other pioneers showing that both central and peripheral mechanisms are involved, whatever humans or other animals. So we could discuss about a number of homologies between human and animals in reactions, behavioral and physiological reactions, and also in brain structures and functions, as a few of us discussed this morning. So, but the lack of verbal language of animals make it difficult to access their emotional experiences. So, there is a need to develop an holistic and pragmatic framework to better access to the content of emotional experience in animals, and to give us the possibility to have the same language and the same reasoning for sharing the knowledge. So I refer to Mason here, who did a very nice experiment in 1970s about emotions, and showing that cognition is involved in emotions, also in animals. And as we heard this morning, an emotion is not a reflex response. So it depends on how the animal perceives its own environment. And this is the main conclusion that Mason did with his experience on monkeys, and showing that frustration is not a reflex that depends on how the animal perceives the situations. And refer here to Lazarus and the school of Lazarus, who developed in human the series of appraisal in psychology, showing that emotion is elicited from an evaluation of the events by the individual. So this is really in strong connection with the work of Mason. So the presentation will be divided in three parts. The first part is the involvement of cognition in emotion, and for that I refer to the appraisal theories, and having a fourth component to understand how emotional experience is elicited with the process of evaluation of the triggering situations. And specifically, I refer to Klaus Scherer, who developed a very pragmatic theory showing that this evaluation in human is based on a limited number of elementary cognitive criteria that is organized very semi-automatically in humans. And I present here the main checks that are being developed and studied by Scherer and his colleagues. And I show you the work we did during 10 years, for showing that, because it's very long, and so we can see just before that we have to train animals to participate to the experiment. And we developed some studies in sheep, and studying especially each of these checks to show that these animals can be sensitive to these different criteria. The first one is the check of previsibility. So very simply, the design is we train animals to get food, very intermittent food distribution, and for some distributions are followed by a sudden event occurring randomly, like the panel plastic just here during feeding. And other one has the signal. That signal is 3 seconds before the panel occurs. And we measure the pattern, the specific pattern of response to surprise effect. So with a startle response and tachycardia here. And even if this event occurs very rapidly, we can see that signaling the sudden event is enough to reduce the strength of the response of these animals. And for the controllability check, so we train again animals to pass the muzzle through a beam. So the window here, and behind the window there is a beam, and each time the animals visited the hole, so it crosses the beam, and it gives the possibility to deliver food in his trough, and also at the same time in the trough of his companion. So, and the young animal was not trained, so he receives the same quantity of food at the same time. So externally speaking, the situation is the same, but in this case, they have no action on the food delivery. So, and we can see with different parameters. Here, this is the vocalizations at the left part, or the heart rate. So even if we offer the possibility for animals to get food, so we can imagine it's a positive, it's an award, it's a positive emotion we can imagine. So according to the type you present food, you can develop some negative emotions in some animals. In the case there is no possibility to control the food delivery. So to conclude on this part, cognition in emotion, so as in humans, animals evaluate their environment. Such evaluative processes are the same at the origin of their emotions. And this assessment is based on the needs of the animals, their preference, their expectations, and the level of control they can exercise on the environment. So based on the combination of the elementary criteria developed in humans, so we could conclude that these animals have the capacity to experience a wide range of emotions, from negative emotions that we know, of course, and to positive emotions, also joy, pleasure, and even some social emotions due to the fact of their social dimension. And now about the emotions, the impact of emotions on evaluation. So we know that we saw that the evaluation elicits emotion, so that the feedback is that an emotion can alter the processes of evaluations. And we call that in psychology cognitive abilities. And these altered cognitive abilities. So we know exactly for the learning and memory performances, for instance, with the famous curve here of head, showing that when the stress increases, the performance of people can reduce, and there is an optimum. And also in ambiguous situations, like here in the story of the glass is half empty or half full, according to your mood. So we know that in humans that there is a cognitive bias, and specifically judgment bias. Sorry, this is not functioning, so I have to declench that. But sorry. Yeah. So we train animals to in this type of test. So in one case, they have to learn. They have to learn that they can go to the food when it is. The bucket is on the right part, and for these animals, you have to learn that when the bucket is at the left part. So they have difficulty because there is a blower just behind the door opening each time the animals. I don't know why it's very sequential. So in this case, this is another one, training for the opposite side. So when it is at the left side, it can go, and when it is at the right side, so he has to learn that he has no possibility to approach. So sorry for the quality of the video, I don't know why. So it's very simple for these animals. So in this case, you can see that when the animals have been trained, so they approach systematically of the bucket when it is on the positive location, and they avoid when this is at the opposite location. Now we share the group of sheep in two groups, and some of these animals are reared during 6 weeks in a sort of model of mild chronic stress we develop based on non-violent and not painful conditions, but only with different exposure to unpleasant, unpredictable or uncontrollable events for 6 weeks. And after that, we train against we put against these animals, and we can see that they didn't forget the performance. But in the next step, we put the bucket in the middle, sort of ambiguous situations. And in this case, we can see that stressed animals makes present some overestimation of the negative consequence of the situation, since they don't approach the gut as if it's associated to negative events. So to conclude, this is another one showing that doing the same on pregnant ewes for exposing to the mild stress model, and after 3 months after birth, we expose our lambs to the same go-no-go test, and we expose in the ambiguous situation, and we can see again here that the animals who come from stress use, they have the same performance as the animals exposed previously to the stress. So there is a sensitive period during before the lamb that animals can reproduce and have a specific negative perception of their environment, even if they are not exposed to the stressor. So the emotion transiently modifies the way the animals evaluate its environment. So this is what we call cognitive bias. A long-lasting emotional state following an extended emotional experience, cognitive bias can be prolonged over the time. So like a sort of mood concept. And we have also showed some sensitive periods that the animals are more sensitive to the modification of their environment and stress environment. And cognitive bias are currently studied in a large diversity of animal species right now, since after sheep we know that for cattle, for pigs, for dogs, for rats, for birds, and some papers are now on sort of on the social insect also. So there is need to consider the animal's point of view to better understand and evaluate their well-being. This is what I try to claim. And finally, for finishing this presentation, briefly to conclude, I participate to a multidisciplinary scientific assessment on animal consciousness, asking by the EFSA. And in this case, we define the consciousness as a subjective or phenomenal experience an individual has from his environment, his own body or his own knowledge. So this is and it mobilizes a large number of mental functions and nervous structures, as we saw this morning. It allows to characterize the way in which the individual feels the situation. This is what we try to define. And with the first findings, that most of the publications dedicated to animal cognitions or neurobiology were not specifically designed to study consciousness in animals. And questioning now about animal consciousness has to rely on what we know in human consciousness, as we do for emotions, as we can do for other affective states. So briefly, we defined the consciousness with 2 dimensions: the level of consciousness, so especially for farm animals who are slaughtered, so you know the reason why, and also, which is new, the content that allows the animals to adopt flexible behaviors for adapting them to their environment. And we develop reference to the work of Stanislas Dehaene, who developed the theory of global workspace for defining consciousness. Since consciousness emerged from interaction between cognitive processors in connection, and all that based on neural correlates and not specifically on the telencephalon, specifically for mammals, but for other parts of the brain. And he defines the brain volume involved with the system generating consciousness and varying according to the time. So if we add what we know on our animals for perception, for attention, for evaluation and memory, so we can imagine to develop the same approach for studying the consciousness in test animals, since we saw this morning that we change according to the different information that the animals can receive. We can observe change in the decision making, in the intention of actions. So we did that for emotions and with cognitive processes, and particularly with the predictability, expectation, controllability also. But we heard this morning about mental time travel, especially for episodic memory. We saw this morning in birds. So, and also we heard about social cognition, the social behavior, the human-animal relationships too, and also about their emotional contagion. That means the empathy the animal can express towards the other one or towards the human too, as we saw just before. So enough information to conclude that there is not a consciousness in animals, but various consciousness with different contents, specifically contents that differ according to the species, the stage of the development, and the early experience. So to conclude, briefly, I try to show you that it's possible to develop theoretical frameworks, specifically to have the capacity to understand each other, about what we do, about when we read the papers, and how to express design, and give us the possibility to access to the emotions in the animal, and also to understand the development of mental states in these animals due to the persistence of cognitive biases, changing the way the animals perceive their environment. So we saw that accumulation of negative emotions can develop an overestimation of negative consequences, but we can imagine also to develop some possibility for these animals to accumulate a very large role, as we saw with the presentation of Dan, of positive emotions, and in this case, so not only be very accepting very well the manipulation and the handling by the human for experimentation, but also with the possibility to develop some overestimation of positive consequences. So that gave us the opportunity to improve practice, especially for farm animals, but for companion animals or for animals from the laboratory with the same questions, and specifically by developing behavioral strategies, offering to the animals the possibility to anticipate or to control positive events, and also to receive positive contrast according to what they can expect, and in this case to generate a positive experience. So it's a sort of cognitive enrichment in addition to the physical or social enrichment. And even if it does not allow concluding firmly the question of whether the animals are fully conscious, the current knowledge provides new insights for investigating sentience and consciousness in animals. Yeah, sorry, I would like to thank all the PhD students and the postdoc students, and the collaboration with my colleagues from Australia and the French agency too. And thank you for your attention.